Hello and welcome to Ideaspark. My name is Priya Hunt. I'm an executive coach whose mission is to inspire leaders like you to thrive and make a bigger impact. And to do just that, we have a wonderful guest today. So Robbie Swale, welcome. Robbie is an author, a leadership coach, and he's created this 12-minute series, which is what we're going to explore today, to see whether we can actually break boundaries of creativity and procrastination while we do that. So it's really wonderful to have Robbie. Robbie's also a podcaster, and I've read some of his wonderful articles on LinkedIn. So he is definitely a multi-pronged, inspiring individual. So welcome, Robbie. Tell us a bit more about you.
That's a really nice thing to say, Priya. No one has said that exact thing about me before, but that's a really nice thing to say. Yeah, so I've been coaching professionally for about 7 years, which now means I've basically reached the point where usually I don't really talk about what I did before that. I think when we first start doing something new, often there's the follow, yeah, I've been a coach for the last couple of years, but before that I did this. But, today, for some reason, I'm feeling like I will. So my background, the first decade or so of my career was I dotted around a lot, and that was quite stressful. Like I had a couple of false starts, and the probably longest one of those was working as a leader in arts and culture. So I ran several small arts organizations and then moved into training and development and leadership development before a long roundabout route finding coaching. And since then, yeah, it's become my work. And that the mission that you're on, it is resonates a lot with me. I think a lot about the impact that I'm having and that other people are having, and how I can support them with that. And the kind of three main things I'm interested in are, I'm interested in leadership, and often these days I'm thinking I haven't really talked that much about this or created much content, but I think quite a bit about what we might call leading with honor. So it's like, how do we do the right things as a leader, even when it feels hard?
Yeah.
And, sometimes people feel like they have to compromise who they are to get ahead or to get the promotions they want. And the challenge that I'm often working with them in coaching is how to get ahead without having to compromise who they are. And I'm interested in the craft of coaching. I think it's got a really important part to play in helping people have a big impact. And that's where my podcast, The Coach's Journey, and the work I do for coaches comes in. And then I'm really interested in creativity. And that's the thing that we're probably going to talk more about today. That's where the 12-minute method comes in. And really the question that I got into or realized I was getting into there is, why do we sometimes really want to make something, want to do something, and yet not do it for sometimes a long period of time? These kind of unfulfilled dream or this kind of wish to do or be something, which hangs around us sometimes for a long time. And I got really interested in that and sort of accidentally wrote some books about it, which two of which are now out.
Excellent. And I've read them and they're absolutely great. And I'd like us to talk a bit about that. But before we do that, I was going to tell our audience that what we are doing today is something we haven't tried before. So we're actually going to experiment with your 12-minute method, aren't we, Robbie? So before we do that, it might be a good idea for you to tell us a little bit about what is the 12-minute method and how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so we are going to experiment. I'm quite excited to do this because I've never done it before. So I've used the 12-minute method for lots of things in my life, but never for a conversation. And I'm excited to see what will happen. So essentially, the 12-minute method came from me feeling anxious and finding it difficult to share myself, things I'd made online. And I was near the start of my coaching business. I was working with a coach, and that came up, and we did some work on it. The way we helped me begin to get through that was that I would write a short article on my train journey from Clapham Junction in Southwest London to London Waterloo, and proofread it once and then post it online. And essentially that became the 12-minute method, because at some point I did it 5 times over a couple of weeks. That was the initial experiment. And then it didn't feel nice. It felt stressful and a bit scary, but it felt good. It's like going to the gym. It's like, it's not pleasant. I was there this morning rowing. It hurt. It wasn't fun. I wanted to stop, but afterwards it felt like the right thing to have done. It was a good thing to have done. So it was a bit like that. It felt good to have done these pieces. And then I decided to do them weekly after that. But at some point I stopped getting the train so much, and it turned out that when I checked how long the train was, it was 12 minutes. So these days, and I've been doing this practice now for almost, as we record this, almost exactly 6 years. So 5 years and 50 weeks, something like that. And at some point I stopped getting the train, and it was about 12 minutes. So now I write with a timer. So set a timer for 12 minutes, write while the timer's going, stop when it stops, proofread it once, and then post it online. And after 6 years, there are about like 260 of those.
Wow.
And in a way, that's one of the what would we say, like the astounding things about this. It's like there's really nothing original or that exciting in some ways about setting a timer to write with and having a habit. But it is this, to me, it's like one of those things that I should have known, and it's obvious, but I didn't know until I'd done it, which is if you write for 12 minutes a week for 6 years, you end up with, I mean, there's some holidays in there and the odd week off and missed week and that kind of thing, but 260 odd articles. And this was kind of just to tie up the 12-minute method idea and the books came from, what I meant about accidentally writing the books. About 3 years in, I realized that I'd written a lot of articles and I actually had 80,000 words at that point.
Wow.
So that's a long book, actually, by the standards of most books that are, especially nonfiction, that are written these days, or a lot of them anyway. But I thought it'd be funny to put it out as a book. And I thought, my blogs are mostly on LinkedIn, and it's quite hard to go back and read someone's past blogs on LinkedIn. It's a bit of a clunky bit of the platform. And so I thought, well, for the people who are interested in that, all 10 of them, including, my old friends or whatever it is, a book would be helpful for them. And it'd also collect this work together. And I was going to call it, I wrote this book in 12 minutes, because I thought that would be funny. And someone I was working with on it told me, asked the question, kind of challenged me. The title is really good for helping people get out of their own way. Can the book be about that? Like, have you been writing about how you get things done in that way? And this is a kind of remarkable bit about it for me, at least. It turned out I had. So it turned out that because what I was, with a timer, maybe we'll find this out in a sec, there's not much time to think carefully about what you're writing. Really, you've got to write about what you're interested in at that time. So there's no research that goes into a 12-minute article. It's just whatever's in me at that moment. And what I was interested in over those first 3 years of the blog was like my own creative battles. Like, how do I get the things I want to do done? And also I was receiving a lot of coaching and I was giving a lot of coaching. And coaching really is just, how do you help someone do a thing they want to do, but they haven't done yet or don't know how to do? So it makes total sense that I've been writing about that, but it is still remarkable to me that the 12-minute method was also created not just any book, but a book about what it is. And through that, 4 stages came out for these kind of big projects that matter to us. That's what the 4 books are about. In the end, that's the series. So start is the first book. You've got to start your thing.
Yeah.
Keep going is in some ways the big lesson. It's like the oh my word, there's 260 articles now, and all I did was sit down for 12 minutes every week. Or there's probably 200,000 words in those articles. I mean, that's an amazing amount that I wrote in 12-minute sittings. And then there's going to be one coming out later in the year about creating the conditions for great work. So if you don't have to do this bit, and people often get lost in this bit.
Yeah.
The most important condition for great work is that you start, and the next one is that you keep going. But there are some other things you can do around habits and relationships and mindsets that are interesting. And then the last one, of course, is if we want to have work that makes a difference, is sharing our work. So 12-minute method is kind of two-pronged. It's how I wrote the books, but it's also those 4 stages. And yeah, we thought we might experiment using a timer to have a conversation.
And I'm really up for that. And I just love the sound of the method. So let's do that, Robbie. So I'll let you guide me with this. So tell me, what do we want to do? Should you start the timer now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to slow down a bit and just think, one of the things, so I'm about to launch a 12-minute method podcast, and the way I'm going to think about that is a little bit like this. And I wonder, actually, I hadn't thought about it, but I wonder if it's partly inspired by the conversations that we've had about doing this episode, to really examine and investigate the times when I have wanted to do something, not done it, and then done it, essentially. So it counts, it's something that matters, and then in the end it's happened. What are the things that have helped me do that? So it's to examine what are all the parts of the 12-minute method. But yeah, let's so what we'll do, but this is completely made up and it might not work, and that's the best kind of creativity, right? If it works, if it's not really creativity, right?
Exactly.
So it might not work. So it'll go something like this. So thinking about the 12-minute method for this conversation, what we'll do, I think, is we'll set a timer. We'll use one of the timers that I use for writing. In fact, I also use it. This is funny. I'll just tell the story really briefly. When my daughter was born, I started working less. And I realized it was much more costly for me to accidentally spend too much time in my inbox. And so I bought this timer actually that we'll use, which is like a cheap kind of cooking timer off Amazon. So when I go into my inbox these days, I set a timer for a different reason, not a creative reason, but to avoid getting lost in technology reason. So that I'm only allowed 20 minutes in my inbox, and then I have to think carefully about whether I want to go in again, because otherwise I just accidentally, or on LinkedIn messaging, accidentally spend an hour, and I really don't want to waste that when I want to get done early so I can go and pick up Leah. So that's why I bought this timer, but I use it for my writing quite a lot now. So what we'll do, Priya, like the kind of key ingredients of that practice for me were, there's a time limit. So, and there's a permission in it. It's written on the train. It's recorded in 12 minutes, whatever it is. There's permission that it doesn't have to be perfect. And that was always really important for me. Doing excellent work is important to me, but if you've got a value around doing really excellent work, the dark side of that strength is it's never excellent enough. You can never finish making it excellent. So that's one of the things that was really important to me. So, we have to give ourselves permission for anything to happen.
Yeah.
And then one of the things is how I start these days is usually one of two ways. So either I don't know what I'm going to write about, and then I'll just sit with, well, what wants to be written about today? And I'll just see what comes up. Some that, the timer's helpful with that, but it takes some nerve sometimes, because you can see the timer's down to 11 minutes or 10 minutes 30. It's like, now I've only got 10 minutes 30 to write whatever comes, but waiting for the right thing I found is important. And sometimes I have a topic, and actually I have them written on some messy bits of paper on the wall by the side of where I'm sitting. And I choose, or sometimes I just know it's earlier in the week and I'm thinking, I'm going to write the piece this week is going to be about this. And then but I don't know what's going to be written. And now I'm up for, if your intuition says one or the other, I'm happy to do either of those. But we started, just as we were talking about this before we switched on, we started talking about creativity.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's an interesting topic for us to spend 12 minutes talking about and see what happens. Yeah. And we've never done this before. I've never done it, so we don't know, but that's kind of perfect. And if it's rubbish, we should still put it out. That's the last thing to say, Priya. The problem, one of the 12-minute method rules is, even if you think it's rubbish, you still share it. In my 12-minute method, other people have it differently. And the reason that's important is because I have found over 6 years of writing these articles that my judgment of which of them is good and which of them is rubbish bears almost no resemblance to which of them people find impactful or like a lot on LinkedIn. So I'm not very good at that. And I think often people who make things are not very good at judging how impactful they'll be for others. So even if we think this has been a bit rubbish, we should probably still publish it.
I'm up for that. And you're totally right. It's that emotional connection with that thing, and people in the audience, they're what matters. So yeah, up for it. You start the timer and let's talk about creativity.
Let's do it. And you can probably hear it beeping. It's a very ugly timer for anyone who's listening and not watching. I'm going to put it here. Hopefully when it sounds, you'll hear it. But if not, I'll put it next to the microphone to make sure we do, because sometimes recording platforms, they edit out background noise and things. Okay. So timer is going.
Excellent.
And what's coming up for me, Priya, is I loved what you started to say. You just started to speak about creativity, which is something that's important to you, it's important to me. And so maybe the starting place, my intuition is saying, if you put your attention on creativity in this moment, what comes up? What do you notice?
A few things are coming up. I mean, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, visually, I can see that book behind you, which is Keep Growing, Never Give Up. So that's something, and I like the cover. I really like it. I think that's quite creative. I can see I don't know if you can see my caricature behind me. So this has been drawn by a very talented friend of mine, and that's another way of creativity that comes to me. The other thing that I was starting to think about when I spoke to you was years and years ago, I used to dance Indian classical dance. So I was a professional dancer. And it's really strange that I haven't danced on stage for ages. Yet I can't separate my identity from the fact that I was a dancer, which I wonder if that's helping me or is that hindering me? And it's just a question I'd just pose out there. And then the only other thing I was going to say was, when I've been coaching people, some of the questions that have come up or people thinking that they're not innately creative. And I'd argue a little bit with that, because I'd say that as human beings, we're all incredibly creative. I mean, just look at that. We've just talked about that book cover, the fact that you write books and you've written them in 12 minutes, the beautiful, caricature by my friend, the dance. I think we are inherently creative. It's just a question of exploring something.
Yeah. Yeah. So much in there, Priya. Like, I have a version of I was never a professional, but I did a lot of acting as a young person. And it's interesting. I don't think about it so much as, it's not so much I can't separate it from my identity. It's more like it just is a part of it. It's just there. And I know it, like, because it's like, it was the main thing that I did, really. The only consistent thing that I did from the age of 11 to 25 or something like that. It's like where I spent almost all my time, made almost all my friends. It's like, it's definitely part of me. And I don't know if you've done this, but I've thought quite a lot about how that experience, thousands of hours, informs who I am, particularly as a coach. I have no doubt that your dancing informs your coaching in all kinds of ways. So that comes up for me. And then what also comes up is, that kind of pernicious idea that there are people who aren't creative. And the sociologist Brene Brown, I remember her saying, or reading her say somewhere, that almost everyone has some story from their childhood of how they aren't creative. Like someone at some point, some well-meaning teacher or parent or friend or somebody else has kind of we've just taken on this story that we aren't that. And I have that story. Like, it's remarkable. It's like, it blows my mind that humans are so complex that I'm basically just in these books coming out, feels like it might be finally me transcending that story. But like, when the books were coming out, the first one late last year, I kept thinking about a thing my friend Phil said to me once. He once said to me, Phil is a coach. He trained me as a coach, Phil Bolton. He said something like, Robbie, you're one of the most creative people I know. And I remember when he said that to me, I was just like, well, who do you know? Well, you were an accountant, Phil, when you were in your first part of your career. No wonder. But I couldn't get past the story that I'm not creative. And we could talk about where that came from, but it's amazing. And then in the end, I think these books, in some ways, and having conversations about them, is like, finally, I even my stories can't deny at this stage, with 260 articles and 4 books written, that I am a creative person. Like, even I can't deny, but it was like, it's like, what is that?
I know. And if you think about it, I mean, start from the caveman days, of our ancestors. They used to draw these amazing drawings. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely amazing. And they had no training and nothing. The other thing it sparks in me is I'm doing my research on the flow state, Robbie. So for my master's. And one of the things I'm reading, the more I read about it, I'm finding out that you don't need to be a genius to get into the flow state. You don't need to be at really the top of whatever profession or whatever art or whatever it is that you're on. But it's more about, like you said, are you trying? Are you making that effort? Your 12-minute, that's why sounds really, it really resonates. It doesn't have to be 12 minutes, whatever the time is, but it's like, are you focusing your attention on something and therefore getting better? I'm sure how you wrote the first article and how you wrote the 260th article would be different.
Yeah, it's definitely true that they are different. And you read some of the early ones, and they're in the books, right? The books contain almost all of the first 3 years of pieces. So you can kind of catch the difference between some of the early ones and some of the later ones. And yeah, like, if you practice something every week for 6 years, you can't help but get better at it. But it was like the talent myth is like, I feel like that's one of the flow point is a really good one. You know, it's like that, the flow thing for me feels like we all have this state which will make us able to create more or better, and we just have to get into it. It doesn't matter how good you are, everyone can get into it and
Yeah,
therefore have, is that right? Like that's the kind of feeling I have.
absolutely. You're absolutely spot on. Everyone can get into it. But some of the things you just mentioned about where you got this timer to do, social media scrolling or emails,
Yeah.
they're really good habits because
Oh,
the whole point of flow follows focus.
mm.
So you cannot get into flow until you are focused. So I think that's
Yeah.
spot on.
And then to catch that other thing you were talking about getting better at something is a big important part of it. It's like it still feels strange to me. Like I wish I'd known this. This was one of the creativity killers for me. Was like if I'm not good at it, then I'm not creative.
Mm,
Whereas, like, I think I find the arguments incredibly convincing that talent is massively overrated, and most of like Matthew Syed makes it really well in his book Bounce. That's the one that I like, but there's other ones that make similar points. Like that, most of the things we think are talent just happen to be people that have practiced something in an extraordinary way or an extraordinary amount of times. And there
mm.
were many kind of speech marks creative things that I sort of gave up on because I wasn't good at them straight away. And I would look across and see, I don't know, my friend Lizzie, when I was 12, was really good at kind of visual art, and I was not able to draw a good caricature. And so I had no talent, and so I should stop. Whereas the truth is, if I wanted to do it, I should practice.
Exactly. And is it Malcolm Gladwell who talks about the 10,000 hours of it? All
Yeah.
masters have this 10,000 hours of practice, isn't it? And if you think about it, what we see as talent is like bamboo, the top stem of the bamboo. When it comes out, that's what we see. Whereas it's spent 12 years, putting roots down under the
Yeah.
ground, which none of us can see. So it's all that hard work, as you said.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's in Outliers. Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours, and he talks about, the Beatles are a great example. They just burst onto the scene with all these number 1 hits and this incredible tight musical stuff. But they've been in Hamburg for years, playing like 12 hours. I mean, maybe not, like 6 or 7 or 8 hour sets every night. Like,
Yeah.
no wonder they're the tightest band anyone's ever seen. I mean, and they needed, I don't know how they practiced songwriting because they also did some extraordinary things there, and they happened to have 3, or perhaps because they had 3 of them, they had 3 great songwriters in one 4-person band. I mean, that's amazing. But don't pretend. No one should pretend they've came out of their mother in as like with the ability to do all that stuff, right? It was absolutely forged in those nights in Hamburg, and there are lots of stories like that. And it's also interesting for us. It's a bit like what we were saying about acting and dancing. It's like you can use that to think about your future as well. It's like, what have I accidentally been practicing
Yeah.
for the last 25 years, for the last 35 years? And,
Yeah.
I think one of the things about, I don't know if it feels in my conversations with other coaches, for example, there are quite a lot of people who have had a creative pursuit.
Mm,
And that makes sense to me because they're often about
mm,
presence
mm,
and dancing in the moment, literally
mm,
sometimes, and
mm.
being within a structure, but also being free. Like there's a lot of things that are very similar. And I think that the structure thing, it I can't remember the detail. You might know this. There's something that I read a long time ago, which is like the experiment is something like if you give kids something and you just say be creative, they
Yeah.
don't come up with anything interesting. But if you give them like some bits of string, some stuff to pile up, and you've got 15 minutes to make something creative, they come up with these weird and wonderful inventions. And the 12-minute timer, that you pointed to again, yeah, my friend Mike talks about structure and space. It's
Yeah.
like you need the structure,
Yeah.
create some structure to allow the
Yeah.
space, and maybe the
Yeah.
creativity is the space, but it helps to have some structure. And that's why so many creative people in different ways have a way that they do things.
Yeah, and you're spot on because there is this myth that all creative people are completely unstructured, or whatever. They might appear that way from wherever you're looking at them, but they probably have a lot of structure in the way they're doing things. They've had a methodology that they've honed for themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a part of a strange, maybe it's just like it's more fun or it's more easy to dream if the creative person is just like they just like roll out of bed and paint the Mona Lisa or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as I can tell, yeah, I haven't really come across anyone like that. And maybe it's interesting, isn't it? We'd have to examine them a bit more. As just for some reason I was thinking of the rock star thing, where
Yeah,
they're like the drugs are there and the life is a mess, and
yeah,
somehow they're still, you know, it's still Kurt Cobain or whoever it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
But yeah, it would be interesting to investigate that for the structure. But yeah, when I've like a really important thing for me is in terms of creativity is absolutely that. It's like, well, there's a great quote from a guy called Somerset Maugham, I think. I
yeah,
don't know how you say
yeah,
that. And
yeah. Somerset Maugham. Yeah,
he says, I only write when inspiration strikes.
yeah.
Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 a.m.
Excellent.
And it's just
That
like,
is
sit
classic.
down, do the work.
Exactly. And you talked about Mona Lisa. Okay, so I'm a big fan of Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he is my. Oh, is that
Oh, timer. One of the rules is we can finish the thought we're thinking. You
okay?
don't have to finish the
So
sentence.
let me just
Leonardo da
finish with
Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci. It's a great time. You're talking about the Mona Lisa. He used to sit down and mix colors and paint strokes and brushes a lot of times. Tried again, tried again. He was really patient. Apparently, he used to do thin layers of colors and then do it again, to then suddenly start bringing this glow out in people. So the Mona Lisa wasn't created when he rolled out of bed and just did one that day. That's a lot of work that's gone underneath it.
Yeah.
Wow, was that 12 minutes? Really?
It was 12 minutes. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I gotta say, Priya, midway through, I was like, I looked at the timer and saw 6 minutes and thought, oh, is this gonna go too fast? And then I thought, no, it's great because there's so much. This is like, I love that we've played this experiment because when I have a podcast and they're long conversations, and this is a great reminder for me that you can get one of the things that a reader of one of my books said when they were trying their own 12-minute practice was like, I thought it would take me a really long time to kind of capture this idea and get it down on paper. I got a lot done in, I think she might have made it a 20-minute practice, but I wrote a lot in 20 minutes. And it feels like we
Yeah.
just covered, you know, two people who have thought a lot about creativity. There was like a big idea at least every minute in that. And it's a real important lesson for me actually in what can be created in a short amount of time.
And I think you're spot on, and I love that. And the thing that I'm going to take away from it for myself was, I've had this sort of almost this poignant sadness in me that I can't dance as much as I used to once upon a time. So that's sadness. But the thing you said was that art is part of me, and you're right, that dance is part of me. I use it all the time, whether I'm talking to you, talking to an audience, writing. I mean, the book I've written is all about a dancer and things like that. So I think dance is part of me, and I should actually just feel happy about it. It's just who I am, and it's not going to go away anywhere. So you're spot on, and thank you, Robbie, because that was something that I've been grappling with, and in 12 minutes you've helped me, find like a glimmer of hope there as to actually this is actually a really good thing and not a
Yeah.
sad thing.
Lovely. Oh, that's so nice. And I get that. I get that sense of sadness. And yeah, I, I think like when I stopped acting and I thought I would do it professionally, and I kind of could have, but probably not well, anyway, for lots of reasons I didn't. And I had to grieve that. That's
Yeah.
what I remember. It was like, there's some grieving actually that
Mm,
needs to be done. Just hearing you say that, I'm thinking of a couple of people that are quite dear to me and how I don't think they've done their grieving
yeah.
really, actually, for their
Yeah.
own art in other ways for that. But yeah, you're absolutely like it's in your body, Priya.
Yeah.
It's like, especially with something like dancing, something so embodied, like it's in you. You can't
Yeah.
get rid of it. It's in all the muscles. It's in the neural pathways everywhere.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and I'm really happy with that. So that's been absolutely amazing, Robbie. It's been such a delight to have you here. Where I'm gonna bring this to a close simply because, as you said, it doesn't take a long time to actually make a point, and I think we've made some really good points. But I'd like you to leave our audience with, your final thoughts on, what do you think they could take away from this discussion that we've had today?
Oh, that's a very kind invitation. Yeah, for me, the key thing that I don't know, I've known but hasn't stood out for me as much before until now is just how important it is that we are really careful with the stories we have about not being creative. I'm really glad you
Mm,
brought that into this conversation. And
mm.
for me, it was great to recognize that my story is maybe finally, you know, when there's plenty of evidence from my whole life, from the acting I've done, the guitar I've played, things I've written, it's like there's no doubt that I am a creative human by most definitions, but it's not, that's not the story I tell myself about me. And so I guess the thing to leave people would be something about that. It's like, just be careful of that story, and you don't have to believe it, and it might not be true.
That is fantastic. Robbie, it's been an absolute delight having you on Idea Sparks. I'm sure you've sparked lots of ideas in people. So thank you so much for coming once again.